It was nearly 2 a.m. when my phone rang. I knew I shouldn't have answered it. I knew it was a mistake even before I saw the name flashing across my screen. Samantha, I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. Letting it go to voicemail would be the smart thing to do. But Samantha and I had never been about smart decisions. With a sigh, I swiped to answer. Yeah. Her voice came through the speaker, slurred and slow, thick with whiskey and something dangerously close to nostalgia. Hey, baby, she purred, stretching the words out like she had all the time in the world. I closed my eyes. You're drunk. Hem, she admitted, without shame. I could practically hear the smirk in her voice. And I miss you. I exhaled through my nose, pressing my free hand against my temple. Sam, we've been through this. Just come over, she interrupted, the teasing edge in her voice softening. For old time's sake, old times. The phrase sat heavy in my chest. Old times meant chaos. It meant shouting matches at 3 a.m. It meant her crying in my arms, promising she'd stop drinking, only to find another bottle stashed under the sink the next day. It meant passion so intense it burned, solving every argument in bed until we forgot why we were fighting in the first place. I should have hung up. I should have ignored the pull in my chest, the way my fingers tightened around the phone like it was a lifeline. Instead, I grabbed my keys. Her apartment was exactly as I remembered dimly. Lit, filled with the stale scent of cigarettes and spilled liquor. Empty beer cans lined the coffee table, and a half-eaten sandwich sat abandoned on the counter. She opened the door in an oversized t-shirt, her long legs bare, her dark hair falling in messy waves around her face. She leaned against the doorframe, her lips curving into a slow smile. Look who actually showed up. I pushed past her without meeting her eyes. You need to stop calling me like this. She giggled, shutting the door behind me. But you always come. She wasn't wrong, before I could say anything else. Her hands were on me, her lips crashing against mine with the urgency of someone trying to escape their own thoughts. And, as always, I let her. It was always the same. The moment we touched, everything else disappeared. The resentment, the history, the pain, it all blurred into something unspoken and electric. Something neither of us could fully walk away from. We tangled together in bed like we had 100 times before, losing ourselves in something that felt inevitable. It was the same rhythm, the same raw intensity, the same way she whispered my name like a confession. After, we lay side by side in the dark, breathing heavy. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for the drunken nonsense to start, the meaningless pillow talk, the sarcastic teasing. But tonight, her voice was softer. I think I want to get back with Andrew. The name hit me like a slap. My stomach twisted, but I forced my voice to stay even. What? She sighed, rolling onto her back. My first husband. We've been talking again. I turned my head to look at her, searching her face for something: regret, hesitation, anything that made sense. And what does that have to do with me? She let out a humorless laugh. You know exactly what it has to do with you. I did, because this was Samantha. Because she never did anything halfway. Because she was reckless and impulsive and always wanted more than one person could give her. I swallowed. You're saying you'd cheat on him again? She shrugged, tracing her fingers over my chest absent-mindedly. Eventually, know myself. I'd beg for attention, and when I don't get it, I'll look elsewhere. Her fingers tightened around mine, her voice quieter. You'd still be here, right? I should have been disgusted. I should have pulled away. Instead, I just stared at the ceiling, my chest aching with something I didn't want to name. Because no matter what I told myself, the answer was probably yes. I didn't sleep that night. Samantha passed out beside me, her breathing slow and steady, her fingers still curled loosely around my hand. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts tangled in the mess she had just dropped in my lap. Andrew. I knew about him. Her first husband, the one she married too young, the one she cheated on when she got bored. The one who left her but never really let her go. He was stable, responsible, the opposite of everything she claimed to want, but somehow he was always lingering in the background, and now she wanted to go back to him. I should have felt relieved. If she was with him, maybe she'd finally stop calling me in the middle of the night. Maybe I could stop this cycle of breaking and rebuilding something that was never whole to begin with. But I didn't feel relieved. I felt sick. By morning, the apartment smelled like stale alcohol and regret. Samantha stirred beside me, stretching with a soft groan before rolling over to blink at me sleepily. You're still here," she murmured, surprised. I rubbed a hand over my face. "Yeah." She smirked. "Guess it was good, huh?" I sighed. Sitting up and pulling on my jeans. "Do you even remember what you said last night?" She frowned, propping herself up on one elbow. Bits and pieces. "You told me you want to get back with Andrew." Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked bored, like it wasn't even worth discussing. "Oh, yeah," I scoffed. "That's all you have to say." "What do you want me to say?" She sat up fully now, pulling the sheets around her. "I told you the truth. Isn't that what you always wanted from me?" I ran a hand through my hair, frustration bubbling in my chest. "You didn't just tell me the truth, Sam. You basically admitted you're going to cheat on him again. And you expect me to be okay with that?" She tilted her head, studying me with a lazy smile. "Aren't you?" I clenched my jaw. "That's not the point." She rolled her eyes and swung her legs over the edge of the bed, reaching for a cigarette. From the pack on the nightstand. "Look, I don't know what you want from me. I'm being honest. I love him, but I know how this goes. I know myself." She exhaled smoke, glancing at me through the haze. "I don't want to be lonely, and neither do you." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wasn't the same desperate fool she thought I was. But she wasn't wrong. I had spent too many nights picking up my phone. The second she called. Too many mornings waking up beside her, knowing it wouldn't last. Too many years convincing myself that loving her, truly loving her, meant taking whatever pieces of her she was willing to give me. And now she was giving me this. A promise. Wrapped in betrayal, a guarantee that I would always come second. And yet, couldn't walk away. I made coffee while she showered, standing in her tiny kitchen, staring at the cracked tiles on the counter. The weight of knowing she would go back to him. Knowing she would still end up here pressed against my ribs. She emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel. Her dark hair damp, her skin flushed from the hot water. "Made me coffee," she asked, amused. I slid a mug across the counter without a word. She sipped it, watching me over the rim. "You're upset." I exhaled sharply. "Of course I'm upset, Sam. This isn't normal. What we're doing, it's not normal." She arched an eyebrow. "You think love is normal?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because love wasn't normal. At least not with her. Love with Samantha was a battlefield, a war fought in bed and in the spaces between apologies. It was knowing she would hurt me and still letting her in. It was the way she could shatter me with a phone call, a look, a touch. It was this, and I hated that I couldn't let it go. She reached across the counter, her fingers grazing mine. "You don't have to stay." It was an invitation, not a challenge. A moment of clarity in the storm. I should have taken it, but instead, I curled my fingers around hers. And just like that, I was lost again. I stayed, of course, I stayed, because I was weak when it came to her. Because no matter how much I tried to convince myself that I deserved more, that I deserved better, I knew deep down that no one would ever make me feel the way. Samantha did, and that was the cruelest part. She knew it. We spent the morning pretending. She sat on the couch, legs tucked under her, flipping through an old magazine like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't just told me she planned on going back to her ex-husband while keeping me on the side. Like I hadn't already accepted it in the worst, most pathetic way possible. I stood in her kitchen, leaning against the counter, watching her. "Why him?" I asked, breaking the silence. She looked up, lips pursed like she was considering whether or not to actually answer. Then she shrugged. "Because he's safe?" I scoffed. "Safe." She smirked, but there was something sad in it. "Yeah, you wouldn't understand." I crossed my arms. "Try me." She tossed the magazine onto the coffee table, stretching her arms over her head before looking at me. "Andrew is predictable. Boring even. But he'll always take me back. He'll always forgive me. And part of me." She hesitated, then sighed. "Part of me thinks I need that." I clenched my jaw. "You don't need him, Sam. You just need something to hold on to." She tilted her head, considering. "Maybe?" I pushed away from the counter, running a hand through my hair. "So what? You're gonna marry him again? Playhouse until you get bored and come crawling back to me." Her eyes darkened, and the first time I saw something close to guilt flash across her face. "I don't want to hurt you," she said quietly. I let out a humorless laugh. "That's funny, because you do it all the damn time." She stood, walking toward me, her bare feet silent against the hardwood. When she reached me, she placed a hand on my chest. Her touch, light but intentional. "I don't do it on purpose," she whispered. I looked down at her, searching her face for some kind of answer. Something that would make this make sense. But I knew better. Samantha was a storm. Beautiful, reckless, impossible to hold on to. And I had spent years standing in the rain, hoping one day she'd change. She never would. "You're still gonna call me," I muttered. She nodded. "Yeah, and I'm still gonna answer." She didn't respond, because we both knew the truth. This was a promise we'd keep breaking. A lie we'd keep telling. A cycle we were too weak to escape. And despite everything, despite knowing exactly how this would end, I still pulled her close. Asterisk, I should have left. I should have walked out that door, let her go back to Andrew. Let her make the mistake of pretending she could be someone she wasn't. But instead, I let her kiss me again. Her lips were warm and familiar, tasting like coffee and the cigarette she had earlier. I knew this wouldn't fix anything. I knew. I was just delaying the inevitable, giving in to something that was already broken beyond repair. But I let it happen anyway, because this was how we solved things, with touches instead of apologies, with whispers instead of answers. And for a little while, it worked. Hours passed before I finally sat up in bed, rubbing my face. Samantha lay beside me, propped up on one elbow, watching me with an amused smile. Thinking too much again. She teased, her fingers trailing down my arm. I exhaled sharply. "You make it sound like a bad thing," she smirked. "It is when you're thinking about leaving." I turned to face her, frustration tightening my chest. "You act like I have." "A choice," she tilted her head. "You do?" "No, I don't, Sam. You made the decision for both of us." Her smile faltered. "That's not fair." I let out a hollow laugh. "You're talking about fairness now." She rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling. I don't want to fight. Of course she didn't. Fighting meant facing the truth. And Samantha only liked honesty when it suited her. I sighed, lying back beside her. "Do you even love him?" She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know." That answer should have infuriated me. It should have made it easier to walk away. But instead, it just made me sink deeper into the bed, into her, into the love that shouldn't exist but somehow still did. "You can't have both of us," I muttered. She turned her head toward me, eyes searching mine. "Why not?" I let out a shaky breath. "Because it's killing me." Her fingers brushed against my cheek, soft and slow, like she wanted to memorize the shape of my face. "I don't mean to hurt you, but you do," I whispered. She didn't deny it, because she knew I was right. The weight of everything pressed against my chest, thick and suffocating. Lying there beside her, I could feel the end creeping closer. Like a shadow in the room neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Samantha sighed and rolled onto her side, her fingers still tracing gentle patterns on my arm. "Why do you always do this?" I turned my head to look at her. "Do what?" She gave me a lazy smile, but her eyes held something sad. "Act like this isn't what you want to." I clench. My jaw. "I don't want this, Sam. I want you." Her smile faded. I pushed myself up on my elbows, my heart pounding. "I want you without the games, without the excuses. I want you to choose me." She sat up too, pulling the sheets around her like armor. "You know I can't do that." I let out a bitter laugh. "Can't or won't." She hesitated, and that was my answer. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, grabbing my jeans from the floor. I couldn't do this anymore. "I wouldn't do this anymore, Seth," she said softly, using my name like a plea. I shook my head, yanking my shirt over my head. "No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to string me along and act like you care when you're already planning your future with someone else." Her voice wavered. "I do care." I turned to face her, the frustration and pain bubbling over. "Then prove it." Silence, that was all she had to offer. I swallowed the lump in my throat, running a hand through my hair. That's what I thought. She looked away, her fingers tightening around the sheets. "I don't know how to be what you want." I exhaled sharply, my chest aching. "I never asked you to be anything other than honest." Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something, anything, to fix this. But there was nothing left to say. We both knew it. I grabbed my keys off the nightstand and walked to the door. My fingers hesitated on the handle, waiting, hoping she'd stop me. She didn't, so I walked out. The cold night air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside. The world felt too quiet, too still, like even the universe was holding its breath. I climbed into my car, but didn't start it. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had left before, dozens of times, but this felt different, because for the first time, I wasn't sure if she would call me back, and even worse, I wasn't sure if I wanted her to. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember unlocking the door to my apartment, or kicking off my shoes, but I remember the feeling of emptiness. I sat on the couch, staring at the dark TV screen. The silence stretching between me and the life I had been trying to escape. It hit me then. This was it. This was what I had been. Avoiding all this time being alone. Because as much as Samantha had hurt me, as much as she had made me question everything I thought I deserved, she had also filled the silence, and now, with her gone, I was left with nothing but myself. I leaned forward, rubbing my hands over my face. I wanted to call her. I wanted to tell her I had changed my mind, that I would take whatever she could give me, even if it wasn't enough. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I had already made my choice, and for once, I wasn't going to let her make it. For me, hours passed, maybe minutes. Time didn't feel real anymore. I kept expecting my phone to ring, for her name to flash across the screen, for her to say something that would pull me back in, but it never came. She didn't call, she wasn't coming after me this time, and I had to live with that. Sleep didn't come easy. When I finally collapsed into bed, I kept replaying our last conversation over and over again. The way she had looked at me like she wanted to say the right thing, but didn't know how, like she knew she was losing me. Maybe that should have made me feel better. It didn't, because even now, even after everything, some part of me still wished she would walk through my door and tell me I was wrong, that she did love me, that she could choose me. But deep down, I already knew the truth. She never would. Morning came too soon. I woke up to sunlight creeping through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. My head ached not from alcohol, but from exhaustion. From the weight of a decision I knew I had to live with, for the first time in years. I woke up without checking my phone. No missed calls. No drunken voicemails. Samantha was really gone. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt like I was drowning. I went through the motions, showered, made coffee, scrolled mindlessly through my phone. Anything to fill the silence. Anything to keep my mind from drifting back to her. But every little thing reminded me of Samantha. The coffee, because she always drank hers with too much sugar. The cigarette pack on my counter, because she always left one behind. The old hoodie, draped over my chair because it smelled like her. I picked it up, gripping the fabric tightly in my hands. How many times had I done this? How many times had I told myself it was over, only to let her back in the moment she called? But this time, she hadn't called, and I refused to be the one to break. I tossed the hoodie onto the floor and grabbed my keys. I needed to get out of here. I drove aimlessly, letting the road pull me forward. I didn't have a destination, just an overwhelming need to move, to outrun the feeling clawing at my chest. But no matter how far I drove, she was still there, in my head. In my heart. I pulled into the parking lot of a diner on the edge of town. The kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and maple syrup. The kind of place where no one asked questions. I slid into a booth, ordered something I wouldn't eat, and stared at my phone sitting on the table. Still nothing from her. I swallowed. The lump in my throat. Good. That's good. Then why did it feel like a knife twisting in my gut? Hours passed, maybe more. I don't know what I was waiting for. Some kind of sign, some kind of closure. But the truth was, I already had it. Samantha had made her choice. And for the first time, I had made mine. I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to answer the next time she called. Because there wasn't going to be a next time. I picked up my phone one last time, my fingers hovering over her contact. Then I did the only thing I could. I deleted her number, not because I didn't love her, but because I finally loved myself more, and that had to be enough. That's the end of today's story. Did things turn out the way you thought, or were there some surprises along the way? Share your thoughts in the comment side. Love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you haven't joined the community yet, now's the perfect time. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're always the first to catch new stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.